New information about a cold case 24 years after a body was found in the Columbia River.
Now the Clark County Medical Examiner's Office has been able to use genealogy to learn the identity of the man.
It was a dreary day on October 26, 1998, when a chilling discovery was made along the banks of the Columbia River. A body was discovered floating near Lower River Road in Vancouver, sending shockwaves through the local community. Authorities were quick to respond to the scene, hoping to uncover the identity of the unfortunate soul who had met their untimely demise. As they approached the body, they were hit with the pungent smell of decay, a telltale sign that the man had been in the water for a considerable amount of time. With no obvious clues as to who the man was, they carefully removed the body from the water and transported him out of the area to begin the arduous process of identification and autopsy. Little did they know that this was the start of a mystery that would continue to weigh on their minds for years to come. As the medical examiner's office began the process of an autopsy on the unidentified man's body, a chilling truth emerged. The autopsy revealed he had died from a gunshot wound to the head. But as investigators pored over the evidence, they were left with more questions than answers. Had the man taken his own life? Had someone else pulled the trigger? The truth remained shrouded in uncertainty. But that wasn't all. It was believed that the man had been in the water for anywhere from 6 months to a year, and this left authorities scrambling to piece together a timeline of events leading up to his tragic end. Despite the passage of time, the medical examiner's office was also able to estimate the man's age at the time of his death, putting him at around 53 years old. These findings only deepened the mystery surrounding the case. Who was this man? And how had he met such a grisly end? The investigators faced a daunting challenge in their quest to uncover the truth behind the man's tragic end. They knew they had to first identify who he was, but it was a task easier said than done, for the man had been found with no means of identification, leaving authorities with no starting point. The investigators turned to the records of missing persons in the area, hoping to find a lead, but their search came up empty, leaving them with no idea who the remains could have belonged to. Desperate for answers, they cast a wider net, notifying agencies throughout the Northwest in the hopes that someone, somewhere, could identify the unknown victim. Despite their tireless efforts, however, their search proved fruitless. Another thing that could have helped investigators in uncovering the man's identity was fingerprints. However, the hope of this was dashed due to the advanced state of decomposition of the body. As days turned into weeks, the investigation seemed to be hitting a brick wall. Frustration began to set in as the investigators were no closer to solving the mystery of the man's identity or his untimely demise. He remained an unknown John Doe, a haunting reminder of the many unanswered questions surrounding the case. Despite their best effort, the case gradually slipped into obscurity. Another mystery in a world full of them. The investigators had done all they could, but the truth remained tantalizingly out of reach. The passage of time can sometimes be a double-edged sword when it comes to solving cold cases. While it may seem like hope fades with each passing year, the truth is that new technology and advancements in forensic science can breathe new life into a case once thought to be unsolvable. In 2008, the investigators working on the case decided to take a fresh look at the evidence. Armed with the latest forensic tools and techniques, they reached out to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification, hoping that the advancements in DNA profiling would finally lead them to the answers they so desperately sought. The University of North Texas Center for Human Identification was able to develop a DNA profile of the unidentified male from samples taken during the autopsy. The DNA profile was a ray of hope for investigators, who wasted no time in submitting it to the National DNA Database, eagerly waiting for a match. But despite their best efforts, no match was found. The DNA profile had given them a new lead to follow, but it also reminded them of just how difficult it can be to solve a case with no definitive clues. Still, the investigators refused to give up hope. They knew that with each new development in the field of forensic science, the chance of finally unlocking the mystery of the man found in the river grew ever greater. After years of the unidentified man's case going cold, investigators were determined to finally uncover the truth. Around 2021, they decided to take a fresh approach and submitted a DNA sample from the remains to a renowned forensic DNA laboratory in Virginia, Bode Technology. With their expertise in extracting DNA from challenging samples, the scientists at Bode Technology eagerly took on the challenge. They knew that by analyzing the DNA sample, they could unlock the secrets to the identity of this mysterious John Doe. A forensic genealogist used DNA from the remains to trace the person's ancestry. Through meticulous research and comparison, the forensic genealogist discovered an ancestral link to a family from California. The lead was promising, and the genealogist pointed to one person in particular, the son of Chelsea Johnson Jr. and Ruth Marie Henson. Interestingly, this individual named Michael Johnson had no traceable activities since 1998. The investigators knew they had struck gold and were now one step closer to finally unraveling the identity of the mysterious John Doe. And so, as the autumn leaves fell in October 2022, Nikki Costa, the operations manager of the medical examiner's office, made a breakthrough in the case of the unidentified man. Nikki managed to track down Chelsea and Ruth Johnson's other children, Russell Johnson and Kathy Bergen, and they revealed some startling information. Apparently, their brother Michael had disappeared without a trace over 2 decades ago and had cut off all contact with the family. Could this be the missing link that investigators had been searching for all these years? Nikki was bent on solving the case of the unidentified man. She tirelessly pursued the lead that the DNA sample belonged to Michael. To confirm her suspicions, Nikki reached out to multiple agencies, determined to find the missing piece of the puzzle. The California Department of Justice Missing Persons DNA program provided analysis of family reference samples, while the Wasatch County Sheriff's Office collected a DNA sample from Johnson's sister Kathy. Meanwhile, the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification sent its DNA profile, which was developed in 2008, to California's Missing Persons program for comparison. With all the evidence gathered, Clark County's chief medical examiner, Dr. Martha Burt, finally concluded that the unidentified man was indeed Michael. Nikki's persistence and the collaborative efforts of multiple agencies had finally given the man a name and a chance at justice. The mysterious circumstances surrounding Michael's death remain a puzzle to investigators, who have yet to uncover any information about his activities leading up to the discovery of his body. Nevertheless, the discovery of his identity was a huge breakthrough in the case, giving investigators a starting point to unravel the mystery. Now authorities are reaching out to the public for help, hoping that someone might come forward with information that could shed light on what happened to Michael. Every little bit of information could make a difference, and authorities are eager to get to the bottom of this perplexing case. It was a beautiful summer day on June 19, 1970. When 2 young men decided to take a leisurely stroll on Independence Pass in Twin Lakes, Colorado. The air was crisp, and the sun shone brightly, making the day perfect for a hike. However, their adventure took an unexpected turn when they stumbled upon something ghastly. As they walked down the road, they noticed a decomposed body of a man lying in a ditch on the north side. It was partially covered with rocks that had fallen from the slope above. But that wasn't the worst part. As the 2 men got closer, they noticed that the entire left arm and rib cage of the body were missing. It was a gruesome sight, and their hearts raced with fear and confusion. The body was dressed in a tattered sweatshirt and gray trousers, and the smell of decay was overwhelming. Who was this man? What had happened to him? There were questions that plagued their minds as they stood there, stunned by what they had just discovered. Without wasting a single moment, the 2 men contacted the authorities, who arrived at the scene with a sense of urgency. As they approached the decomposed body, they suspected that the man was in his early 20s. The officers carefully examined the scene, taking note of every detail that could help them solve the mystery. In addition to the missing left arm and rib cage, the officers also noticed that the man was wearing 3 pairs of socks and hiking shoes. They even found a sock pulled over his left shoe. But that wasn't the only odd thing they found. Upon searching the man's pockets, they found $7 and a razor, but those items offered little insight into the man's identity or the circumstances of his death. No wallet or ID was found on the man, leaving the officers to wonder who he was and what had happened to him. Officers also extensively searched the area around the body, hoping to find any clues, but to no avail. The man's remains were quickly removed from the scene and taken for analysis, but despite their best efforts, detectives couldn't identify him. They scoured missing person reports, interviewed locals, and even searched through dental records, but nothing seemed to match. The man was a complete enigma, and the mystery only deepened as they delved deeper. The officers were perplexed by the condition of the body. It seemed as though the man had been out in the elements for a long time, possibly all winter, yet his clothing didn't seem appropriate for such harsh conditions. The officers also couldn't help but wonder what could have happened to the missing body parts. Had they been removed post-mortem, or had they been eaten by wild animals? It was a gruesome thought, but it was a possibility they couldn't ignore. The officers could only speculate until a shocking discovery was made. On July 15, 1970, more than 3 weeks after the body was found, a state highway maintenance man found the missing limb below the road where the body had been discovered. The shoulder and arm were stripped down to the bone, but the hand and wrist still had flesh on them. The discovery only deepened the mystery. How had the limb ended up there? And why was it separated from the body? The condition in which the body part was found was perplexing, leading the officers to speculate that it could have been removed after the man died, possibly by a snowplow, but they had no concrete evidence. As the years passed, the mysterious man found Independence Pass became nothing more than a forgotten memory. The lack of identification left him with no name and was simply identified as Independence Pass John Doe. He was relegated to the status of an unknown soul buried beneath a simple marker reading "Unidentified Male" in the Evergreen Cemetery of Leadville. The case went cold, and as time marched on, it seemed that the truth behind Independence Pass John Doe's identity would remain a mystery forever. In 2011, a man named John Pearson, who had devoted years to cleaning up the Evergreen Cemetery, stumbled upon the grave of the Independence Pass John Doe while cleaning an overgrown section. Pearson, who was also a Vietnam veteran, couldn't help but be curious about the man's identity. He wondered if perhaps Independence Pass John Doe too was a fellow veteran of the Vietnam War. Pearson's curiosity led him to reach out to Audrey Simpkins, a crime and intelligence analyst with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, who then enlisted the help of Sylvia Pedham, an expert in identifying John and Jane Does. Together, they journeyed to the small town in August 2011, eager to uncover the truth behind the mysterious grave. But despite their efforts, the case once again grew cold, leaving Independence Pass John Doe's identity shrouded in secrecy for a little while longer. In 2013, after 2 years of silence, the case of the Independence Pass John Doe started to gain momentum. Audrey and Sylvia returned to Leadville and searched for the case records, only to find out that they were missing. Together with the then coroner Shannon Kent, they made sure that the case details were entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Systems database. Sylvia, a determined woman, then asked the Lake County Sheriff to exhume the remains of the John Doe to enable DNA sampling. The body was exhumed, and with the help of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, a fingerprint was obtained. DNA was extracted from the John Doe's femur and skull at the University of Northern Texas, and hope was renewed for finally identifying the unknown man. But instead of being laid to rest in his grave at Evergreen Cemetery, John Doe's body remained in a casket in the office of former Lake County Coroner Shannon. It took 8 long years for the man to finally be reburied. In the quiet of 2022, a breakthrough was made in the decades-long case. A team of detectives submitted DNA extracted from the unidentified John Doe for forensic genetic genealogy testing. The test yielded a promising lead. Details of this lead remain shrouded in mystery, but it was enough to crack the case wide open. Finally, After all these years, John Doe had a name: Gardner Paul Smith, who would have been just 39 years old when his remains were discovered. Gardner was no longer just a nameless body in a grave. He had a story, a life, and a family. Born in Modesto, California on September 22, 1930, Gardner was the older son of Paul and Bernita Smith and grew up in a skiing family. Both of his parents were skiers, and it was only natural that Gardner and his younger brother Armour took up the sport. For Gardner, skiing was more than a hobby, it was a way of life. He attended the University of Nevada in Reno, where he not only studied, but also competed on the college ski team. Gardner's dedication to the sport was admirable, and he was always pushing himself to improve. In fact, he was known to experiment with different techniques, once even attempting giant slalom courses on cross-country skis to work on his balance. But Gardner was more than just an athlete. He was a deep thinker and a humanist, always seeking to understand what it truly meant to be alive. In the latter part of his life, he became fascinated with psychic phenomena and the powers of the mind, and he wanted to unlock the secrets of human consciousness, and he spent countless hours exploring this area of study. In June 1951, Gardner was just a young man when he joined the Army, serving 2 years of active duty, and then transferring to the reserves where he served 4 more years. He did his duty honorably and was discharged in June 1957. Gardner's path eventually led him to Argentina, where he met the love of his life, Jennifer Dawn Andrews, in 1961. The two got married, and Gardner brought his new bride back to California. It wasn't long before they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Jean, into the world on June 18, 1962. However, at some point, Gardner left his wife and young daughter. Jennifer eventually obtained a divorce from Gardner in 1968 and went on to marry Ernest M. Dillard. Unfortunately, Ernest passed away in 1974, leaving Jennifer a widow once again. As for Gardner, he drifted between California and Aspen, seemingly unable to settle down after his divorce. Dick Dorworth, an accomplished ski racer and Gardner's longtime friend, vividly recalls the last time he saw him in 1968. Gardner, who was living life on the road, was trying to promote a new ski pole grip he had designed. This was not the first invention he had created, as he had also come up with double-lens goggles but had failed to market it. After a week of crashing on his friend's couch, Gardner vanished into the unknown, never to be seen by Dorworth again. In fact, the last anyone heard from Gardner was through a postcard he sent to his mother dated November 12, 1969. It simply read, "I am doing all right. Don't worry. Love, Gardner." At the time, his mother was hopeful, but little did she know that it would be the last that she would ever hear from her son. Gardner's daughter Jean was filled with unanswered questions about her father, who disappeared when she was just a baby. For years, she was left to wonder where he had gone and why he never came back for her. Her mother and family members were tight-lipped about his absence, leaving her to piece together her father's life on her own, and it wasn't until decades later in that she finally got some answers when her father's true identity was discovered. Now a 60-year-old woman with a family of her own, Jean is determined to give her father the honor he deserves. She plans to arrange a small military funeral and have a headstone made in his memory. As for where he will finally be laid to rest, Jean hasn't made up her mind yet. But one thing is for certain: she will always hold a special place in her heart for the father she never got the chance to know. The mystery surrounding Gardner Smith's death persists. While there is no record of an autopsy performed on him, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation reports that there was no evidence of foul play, and speculations about how he died continue to circulate. Some speculate he may have been the victim of a crime and his body was dumped in Independence Pass. Others suggest he may have hiked up there with the intent to hike back down, only to get caught in a sudden storm, become disoriented, and succumb to the cold. However, the truth about Gardner Smith's death remains shrouded in mystery, leaving many unanswered questions. It was a chilly day on November 28, 1992, when something unusual caught the eye of a group of people near the Walker Wildlife Area off River Road in Colorado. As they approached the spot, They were struck with horror. The decomposed body of a man lay there, missing its skull. But even in death, the man was making a statement. He wore green shorts with bold black designs and a tan to black pullover shirt with a mysterious logo on the left side of the chest. The sleeves were cut off at the biceps. The people called it in, and authorities sprang into action, racing to the scene with sirens blaring. As they arrived, they quickly got to work, scouring the area for any clues that could help them identify the man. They searched high and low, turning over every stone, but alas, nothing came up. Even the man's clothes yielded no hints as to his identity, leaving the authorities scratching their heads in bewilderment. With no other choice, they took the body away for autopsy and identification, hoping that they could at least get some answers there. The medical examiner performed the autopsy, and what they discovered left them reeling. The man had been stabbed to death, leaving no doubt it was a case of homicide. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community, and fear began to set in. Who would do such a thing, and why? The investigators knew that they had their work cut out for them, and they were determined to solve the gruesome crime. Little did they know the road ahead would be filled with twists and turns, leading them down a dark path of mystery and intrigue. The investigation began with a sense of purpose as detectives searched for any lead that could bring them closer to solving the mystery. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, it became clear that this was going to be no ordinary case. The trail was cold, and every lead they pursued led them to a dead end. The absence of the man's head was a puzzle that haunted them day and night. Where could it have gone? Was it taken as a trophy, or was it buried somewhere out of sight? The detectives were determined to get to the bottom of it all, but they were up against a formidable adversary, time. As the months turned into years, the case became colder and colder. The memories of the man in green shorts began to fade, and it seemed as though justice would never be served. However, detectives never gave up hope, and they would one day uncover the truth. Years passed, and new technologies emerged that promised to make their jobs easier. In 2011, the case was revisited, and the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Systems was brought in to assist in the investigation. But despite their best efforts, the detectives found themselves once again hitting a dead end. Every lead they pursued seemed to fizzle out, and they were left with nothing but more questions. It was a frustrating time for everyone involved as they grappled with the realization that they may never uncover the man's true identity. But the detectives refused to give up, even as the years continued to tick by. They knew that there was always a chance that new information could come to light, and they remained ever vigilant, never letting the case slip completely from their minds. In the year 2022, the Mesa County Sheriff's Office was determined to leave no stone unturned in their quest to bring justice for the man in green shorts. They knew that traditional investigative methods had failed them in the past, so they decided to turn to cutting-edge technology for help. They reached out to Othram, a forensic DNA analysis company, in the hopes that advanced genetic testing could help them finally establish the man's identity, or identify a close relative who could provide vital information. It was a long shot, but detectives were willing to try anything to crack the case. But advanced DNA testing doesn't come cheap, and the detectives knew that they would need to secure funding to move forward. So they turned to DNA Solves, a platform that combines crowdfunding, volunteer data, and cutting-edge genomics to solve unsolvable cases. Thanks to the tireless efforts of the detectives and the generosity of the public, the funds were raised and the testing could begin. The skeletal remains of the man in green shorts were a puzzle that had confounded detectives for nearly 3 decades. But the remarkable advancements in forensic science helped them to finally begin putting some of the pieces together. The remains were carefully packaged up and sent to Othram's state-of-the-art lab in the Woodlands, Texas. There, a team of brilliant forensic scientists worked tirelessly to extract DNA from the bones and build a comprehensive genetic profile for the unknown man. Using a cutting-edge technique called forensic-grade genome sequencing, they were able to piece together a complete DNA sequence, painting a picture of the man's genetic makeup like never before. But having a DNA profile was just the beginning. The team at Othram knew they needed to use this information to generate investigative leads that could help them to identify the man, and that's exactly what they did. With the help of their in-house genealogy team, they employed the power of forensic genetic genealogy to trace the man's distant relatives and create a comprehensive family tree. This information was then shared with the Mesa County Sheriff's Office, who were then able to identify a potential sibling of the unknown man. With a DNA sample from this sibling, the team at Othram was able to confirm that the unidentified man was Etus Thomas E.T. Romero. The discovery of Etus's identity was a significant breakthrough for the Mesa County Sheriff's Office. But with the mystery of his death still unsolved, detectives knew they had to dig deeper to uncover the truth. Etus had come a long way from his early life, but the details of his upbringing remained shrouded in mystery. Despite this, detectives were able to piece together a picture of the man he had become. As detectives delved into his past, they discovered a man who had lived a life of service and sacrifice. His military service was just one example of the courage and bravery that defined him. They discovered that Etus was just 26 years old when he met his untimely end. He had ventured to Grand Junction, Colorado in the company of 2 other individuals from Louisiana in 1991. He resided in a now-demolished house on 4th Street and worked as a dishwasher in a local eatery. The details surrounding his death remained hazy, but it is believed that he was killed during the summer of 1992. Now, as detectives continue to piece together Etus's story, they're asking for the public's help. If you have any information that could shed light on his untimely death, please do not hesitate to contact the authorities. Every little bit of information could bring us closer to the truth.